senator from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm really pleased to be here with my fellow senator from Nebraska and the other members of the small team that was really blessed to be asked to join Senator Scott as he led us to where we are today, which is introducing the Justice Act. You know, I'm thinking about where the great talents lie in the United States Senate, and one of the things we all know, pretty much all of us do pretty well, is talk. We know how to talk. Sometimes we talk too much. Tim doesn't talk that much. Senator Scott doesn't talk that much, and he even said that about himself. But I can tell you the skill that he has that a lot of us need more of, and I always, when I'm asked by school children what's the best skill to have, and that's the ability to listen. And he has listened for years and years. He's not just lived this, he's listened. And he said just yesterday he was with the family of one of the victims, and a very moving day for him. So I'm here today to rise in support with my colleagues for the Justice Act. I join the overwhelming majority of Americans and West Virginians who, in sadness and frustration and sorrow, when we witnessed the horrifying video of the murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis Police Department. You know, it's absolutely unacceptable. But you know what? The vast majority of our law enforcement officers here and around the country are just like us. They want to have a great and peaceful nation. They want to have great and peaceful communities. They want their families to feel safe in their homes and out in their streets of their communities, just like we do. And a lot of them take their oath as seriously and do their best to protect our communities. So it's not enough to say that the death of George Floyd was a terrible, isolated tragedy, because we know many of these have preceded this date. But I said it's almost like picking a balloon, popping a balloon, and all of this unrest underneath and questions and sorrow has been festering. And so here we are today. I think the great majority of us want to put all this energy and frustration into action. We want to have something substantive that we can tell the American people, we listened, we heard, we feel this, and we want to find solutions. We have to recognize that every time that force is used inappropriately by law enforcement, that our justice system is eroded. We have to understand our history, where Black Americans have been too frequently denied their basic rights. And it is our job to make sure that Americans, regardless of race, can feel that law enforcement is there to protect them and their families, and that they trust that. The trust factor is where the erosion has been most remarkably in view of all of us, the lack of trust. So it is our job to hear these voices and to act. Doesn't mean defunding in my opinion, it doesn't mean defunding the police. It means improving the police, and improving equal protection, so that everybody has basic protections to everyone, and we're all equal in the eyes of justice and in the law. So I think that we've seen looting, we've seen officers who have lost their lives, we've seen an underbelly to our country that's been difficult to watch, but what we've seen too is an outcry of the American citizens peacefully protesting what they see as an inequities in their lives. And you know, when I look in the crowd, and I was right there in Washington last week when a crowd of about 150 protesters, I was right there, and they walked by me very peaceably, signs and chanting. Most of the people in that group were probably under 30 years old, in solidarity. A lot of black faces, a lot of white faces, men and women, young people who felt that lack of trust. So we look at, you know, how people have exercised their First Amendment rights, and it's a beautiful thing to see. Unfortunately, it's been eroded by some of the destructive things that have come along with it, but at the base of it, we're hearing the same things every day in our states every day. So while we want to know that our Declaration of Independence is lived up to, and that the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed that no government, including state and local governments, can deny basic constitutional rights, we haven't quite lived up to all of that. A century has passed since Reconstruction, more than a century, and a century passed before we passed major civil rights legislation in 1964. And one of the sources of great pride for me was my father was one of the leading Republicans in the House of Representatives representing West Virginia in 1964 that helped make sure that passed. I actually have a pen that was used in signing that in my office, and a picture of my dad at the White House when it was signed. So our job is not done. When I hear the voices of mothers who say that they are fearful that their son might not survive a simple traffic stop, or they have to have certain behaviors, as Senator Sass said, that is so different than what he learned growing up as a young man, how to interact with police officers in that situation. We can't have those anguished cries in that double system anymore, and that's what this bill is about. I'm proud to be with Senator Scott in introducing the Justice Act. It's been interesting to watch him and all of us really listen to the different segments of our society that have talked to us, our friends, our neighbors, the police, members of the communities of color, our religious communities, our news commentators. I did like 6 interviews today on the TV about this, and every single one of them asked me one fundamental question, and I wish that some of my friends on the other side of the aisle would be here. You don't have a very good history in this body of having Republicans and Democrats joining together to get something done. How do you think you can do this now? Well, I said, well, today we did. We did the Great American Outdoors Act. Several months ago, we did the CARES Act. So we can do it. Where there's a will, we can do it. And if we don't do it, we're failing so many people. We're failing ourselves. We're failing our countries, our communities. We're failing our law enforcement communities. And so I would say that we need to but begin this job of a difficult conversation and make sure that we get this bill onto the Senate floor, debate it in front of the general public. When we start debating things on the Senate floor in front of the general public, you know what happens? Same thing that happened during the impeachment trial. I know all of us were getting all kinds of input from people all around because people are watching it. They're seeing what's actually going on. That's what we need. So if we want to have discussions on qualified immunity, if we want to ban chokeholds, which I want to do, and our bill does essentially, but more definitively, yes, I'm all for that. Let's have the discussion. Let's talk about it in front of the American people. So I believe that law enforcement has a lot of great people that work in and around law enforcement. But they need the equipment. They need the cameras. They need to have the real-time evidence and the real-time evidence of wrongdoing and evidence of doing it right. It's a protective device. We should have everybody have the availability of that in law enforcement. We also require that law enforcement agencies retain disciplinary records on officers and make sure that they check an officer's record from other agencies before making a hiring decision. Kind of thought that was going on anyway. I sort of did. But we need to make sure and make clear that that's what we absolutely want to do. The bill incentivizes state and local police agencies to ban the chokeholds, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm for even more definitive language on that. It also provides much training in all kinds of areas, de-escalation, or if an officer is in a situation where another officer is using overwhelming force improperly, that officer is trained on how to interdict that situation. We saw that happen in Minneapolis. Sadly, the officers did not. But maybe they didn't know exactly how to do it, when to do it, what form it should take. Let's explore that. So to keep our community safe, we need our police officers, but we need trust in our law enforcement. There should be no conflict between a pro-civil rights bill and a pro-law enforcement bill. They should be able to be joined together. So this supports our police officers while bringing about positive change that will guarantee equal protection to all of our citizens. The police reform bill will make a real difference in advancing our constitutional ideals and in making our communities safer. So I'm proud to stand with Senator Scott, but I want to stand with the entire body to talk about the ways to make this bill even better, to take the 70% of this bill that we have shared ideals on and shared ideas and put those into action, and to not dither here, to not score political points, to say to the American people, these are tough decisions and we're going to have it. And we're going to have it where you can see it, right here on the floor of the United States Senate. So thank you very much. I'm proud to be with my colleagues, and with that, I yield the floor.